The liturgical cycle for celebrating the Ascension was last Thursday. It's something we usually skip over, and I wonder whether many say, thank goodness, for any literalism about the Ascension defies common sense, given what we know about the universe today. Actually, the Bible doesn't give us much to go on. Ascended into heaven is only recorded in Luke twice. Sometimes people confuse the ascension with the resurrection. However, the resurrection happened on the plane of history. In contrast, the ascension is a mystical event, a creedal codicil with mythological overtones. Mythological not in the sense that it is rubbish or untrue, but as a story that actually conveys profound and meaningful truth. So what's its significance for us today? The ancient world's cosmology was described by Ptolemy, who ruled what was really the Greek Empire from Egypt. He pictured the cosmos as a series of spheres which kept the heavenly bodies in place. Earth, flat of course, was the realm of finite life. Whereas the heavens, plural, represented the sacred realms where God and the angels dwell. Now, if that view of the universe is no longer tenable, what can we make of the Ascension? Let us see if we can untie it from its ancient cosmological origins and explore what it might mean for us today. First, the Ascension is an affirmation that the significance of the flesh and blood of historical Jesus transcends time and space. That the one that they and we know personally who transforms lives is indeed of universal significance, no longer limited, physically present, but now set free from the limitations of a particular existence in a tiny corner of space and time, so that the living and vivifying presence of Christ would henceforth be available at all times and all places and to all people. The meaning of the Christ event transcends not only the world view of the first century, but also the vast silences of space we have had revealed to us, a meaning which even the wheeling galaxies and gas clouds cannot give. Second, the Ascension attests the cosmic significance for Jesus as the Christ. And it's good to note that Christian devotion claims that the ascended Lord still bears the wounds inflicted in his passion. Have any of you seen the awe-inspiring tapestry in Coventry Cathedral? The Ascension is not a triumphalist reversal of the Passion, but testifies that it is precisely the humble, self-emptifying, suffering love of Christ that has the power to overcome the destructive powers of dominion and oppression, all that destroys life. Let's look again at the Luke text that we heard today. Despite the nostalgic clinging to Jesus, Lord, are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel? I mean, they still don't get it. Jesus challenges them to respond to his vision of a new humanity, of a new heaven and earth, by becoming his living witnesses to the very ends of the earth. They are to They are to be the risen body of Christ who will be empowered by the Spirit of wholeness. In other words, don't keep looking up, holding up your creeds and theologies and theories and your abstracted ideas. Look around. Look around you and you can see in the midst of lived life the reality of personal and social transformation. Where that happens, there is a Christ event. We witness it and we can testify to it in our own lives. Jesus said, "You are to be witnesses for me in your own experience." Let me share something which links ascension and transcendence with the everyday realities and challenges we have to face. I had something of a eureka moment when I saw what I'd not seen before, or what I couldn't see at the time. It happened in India after visiting a place called Mussoorie, a hill station up on the Himalayan plateau. There, my companions and I had been transfixed by the eternal snows. And by the way, they may not be eternal for much longer with climate change. But we were awed by what we saw. I felt all I wanted to do was just to stay there, wrapped in the wonder of it all, and forget about the struggles we were having to face in our lives. But then we had to come down. As we walked down the old trail used before there were any sealed roads, suddenly the mist lifted and we saw the vast Ganges Valley, all the teeming life on the plain, the bursting cities, as well as endless small farms, and that too filled me with awe. Suddenly, I was able to see things in their true perspective. It was as if the true reality of the task of improving the life of the people could be seen for what it was in a dramatic way. The fact that things had not been going well for us back at our base in Bombay or Mumbai. Blocks had been put in our path. We'd been training people to work in villages in the state of Maharashtra, but the government had not yet given the nod necessary to implement this work. And we had staff problems. Working with our Indian colleagues was fraught with complexity. At that time, our key leader had been sent away, and the mantle of responsibility fell on my shoulders to encourage and to lead our team at this crucial time. I had a deep sense of inadequacy. Was I up to it? Perhaps I should just leave. But coming down the track, some children called out. Now, they weren't the teeming masses, they were kids with smiles as broad as their faces. At that moment, I had this overwhelming sense that I cared for them. Suddenly, I felt a weight lifted from me. Yes, I was up to the task. I really could just do it. Eureka! This was the affirmation I needed. It was a moment of grace, and I was empowered to take on my responsibilities. Incidentally, on returning to Bombay, the word came through that Mrs. Gandhi, the Prime Minister, had given the nod to our efforts. No doubt you can recall moments when you felt overwhelmed, unable to cope. But then, when getting things into their proper perspective, such as realising that God loves you and all who you care about, that is, getting things into perspective so that you can carry on with a strength you didn't have before. Getting things into perspective is our challenge in Australia at this moment. We've been given an invitation by the 250 First Nations people who after 2 years of dialoguing with their communities across Australia, some people forget that, who signed the Uluru Statement from the Heart, to walk with them to support their desire for a voice to Parliament embedded in the Constitution. This means voting yes in the upcoming referendum. Now, you might want to say, why am I bringing up something which some would say is political? Or some would say, yes, but everything's really political. But personally, I think the voice is basically a moral issue. And from my Christian perspective, I see it as a matter of truth and justice. Only by seeing things from the larger perspective can we fully appreciate what we are being asked to do. The larger perspective here is the truth regarding our nation's history. Consider these things penned by one of our supporters in our local Uluru support group when her croquet club members refused to listen to the case for a yes vote. She writes, Aboriginal Christians were totally overlooked at Federation in 1901. It's as if they had never existed. They are excluded from voting, something which was strangely in sync with the adoption of the White Australia policy. The exclusion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islands was justified by the legal fabrication that Australia was terra nullius, an empty land, ignoring the fact that across Australia, perhaps at the time of colonial impact, 2 million people had been caring for the land for up to 65,000 years. And friends, the fact is, colonial settlement was absolutely devastating. Death drew to introduced diseases, driven off their lands, massacres on a much larger scale than we dare recognise, transported to missions and reserves and stations, often in chains, where they were abused and neglected and forced to submit to the control of those in charge. The resistance was met with violence and torture. Up to 30% of children were taken from their parents, forbidden to speak their language. Mixed race children were adopted with the primary purpose of erasing their culture and assimilating them into the dominant culture. And Darwinian the ideas of the survival of the fittest were deeply embedded in the white Western mindset. And that justified discrimination, prejudice, blatant racism, almost assuming that they were subhuman. Blackness was abhorred. Sadly, such ideas still linger. A wonderful diversity of clan groups and languages was connected across the whole continent by the songlines. That picture's rather special to me because it was given to me by David Moljali from Moanjum back in the 70s. Why then have we been so ignorant of their profound and sophisticated culture, spirituality and complex social organisation? I could go on, but I just want to make the point that we are challenged as non-Indigenous people to recognise the truth about the past. Their suffering has been painful and traumatic, and the consequences live on in the present. Yes, there have been many positive steps forward, but having a secure structure for their voice to be heard has been denied them. In the Uluru Statement, they call it the torment of our powerlessness. It's a matter of plain justice to redress the wrongs of the past. Having a voice to Parliament can do that. Some say, but what about the dissenting Aboriginal voices, who seem to be getting a lot of airplay at the moment? Yes, they're worthy to be listened to. But I want to ask, who do you listen to and why? I commend the big picture, that is, listen to the 250 people who signed the Uluru Statement after 2 years of having dialogues around the country. I don't know any other example of such grassroots listening in our history. Listen to the voices of those who have been in the forefront of the struggle: Noel Pearson, Pat Anderson, and many others, as well as the remarkable voices of the younger generation, such as Teela Reid. Let me quote the statement. In 1967, we were counted. In 2017, we seek to be heard. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. And do you know that it's almost 30 years ago that the Uniting Church allowed and created a structural voice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the Uniting Church? It's called the Congress. It's happened before. And by the way, the voice is supported by both our church at the assembly level and at the recent national meeting of the Uniting and Islander Christian Congress. And other churches, such as the Catholics and the Anglican at the national level, have done so too. Let me return to the disciples who were on the brink of a eureka moment which would change them forever. That is the day of Pentecost. We'll celebrate that next Sunday. After the ascension, they would experience a moment which would make sense of it all. Despite the ecstasy they experienced, a remarkable inclusion of all peoples of the known world. Despite different languages, there was a new sense of oneness, of all belonging to the one family of a loving God. Both diversity and unity were held together. New life and community were about to flower in the way which would transform the world. The birth of the new happens in those moments when you see, eureka, that life is good despite the horrors of the world. When we personally know that we are affirmed just as we are. When we are freed from burdens of the past, including our history, that which oppresses our spirit. When the future opens up and life goes in entirely new directions. Let us thank God that the ascended Christ remains the reality among us of life continually made new. Finally, a poem, Germination, by Marion Musgrove. Something new is growing inside you, a split seed you didn't even know about. Something unexpected is prizing open the bars of your rib cage, reaching beyond your notions of what is. It needles you with possibilities. Its roots unsettle your soil. You find yourself breathing in an unfamiliar scent, one that mystifies, tantalizes, invites.